Elrond the Bold Hears a Parable by Bobby Grace. Elrond the Bold led a good life, as far as he could tell. Outside of the occasional problem with some maiden's father, or a bar tab that he had to duck on the way out of town, he figured he had it about as good as a guy could expect in his line of work. His line of work was, of course, being Elrond the Bold. Everybody agreed, including that one ex-wife whose mule he was still paying for. The thing that Elrond the Bold did best was be Elrond the Bold. Except for a brief attempt at being Elrond the Pious, for which his friends began calling him Elrond the Asshole, he'd pretty much made a career out of being Elrond the Bold. Once, while crusading boldly, Elrond ran into a guy who told him a story about a grasshopper and an ant. The guy called it The Story of the Grasshopper and the Ant. Elrond thought that was good because it turned out to be a story about a grasshopper and an ant. Elrond didn't like going into a story expecting it to be about one thing, say a grasshopper and an ant, then having it turn out to be a story about something else altogether, like nose hair and a rutabaga, for example. It was summer. The grasshopper was out singing and hopping around and minding his own business. The ant was fussing about gathering food and digging tunnels. Everybody was enjoying themselves until the ant came over and started giving the grasshopper shit because, according to the ant, the grasshopper was exhibiting inappropriate behavior, what with all the hopping about and singing and such. He, the grasshopper, should be doing as the ant and collecting food and digging tunnels. This part puzzled Elrond. Why should the ant give a shit about what the grasshopper was doing in the first place? Elrond figured it had probably puzzled the grasshopper too, but that part was unclear from the man's story. The man had also failed to explain why the ant thought he needed to fuck with a grasshopper who was minding his own business. As insect stories went, Elrond thought, that one had a lot of plot holes. It turned out that the grasshopper died at the end, and the ant blamed it on the grasshopper's failure to embrace the ant way of life. Toiling, collecting food, tunneling, and whatnot. That's where the story ended. As bug stories went, Elrond had heard much better, and he boldly said so. The man said it was a parable, a simple story used to illustrate a moral or spiritual lesson, one which Elrond apparently failed to grasp. Parables were popular over in the Middle East, the guy said, particularly in the Holy Land. They were the next big thing in storytelling, the guy said. Elrond allowed that parables may be all the rage over in the Holy Land, but he, Elrond, preferred a more straightforward insect story. The Spider and the Fly, for example, was a favorite of Elrond's. Though technically, Elrond was willing to admit, The Spider and the Fly was a story about an insect and an arachnid, rather than a story about two insects. Still, it didn't muck about trying to illustrate any moral or spiritual lessons. It was straightforward. Anybody could see it. Flies should stay away from spiders. The man told Elrond the point of the story was that the grasshopper died after being warned by the ant to stop all that hopping around and singing. While it was true the grasshopper died, Elrond reasoned, there seemed nothing to connect that occurrence with the grasshopper's failure to embrace the self-righteous ant's way of life, unless the ant killed the grasshopper for not obeying. The grasshopper would have died anyway, as far as Elrond could see. The ant surely died as well, thought Elrond, stepped on, eaten by a lizard, drowned by a raindrop, something, but nobody mentioned any of that. So what was the point? Elrond didn't think these parable things would catch on. They just left too many questions.